The new Superman movie is finally here, and big shocker, people are divided on it. And personally, I feel like this movie's success hinges on 3 questions. 1, is it a good Superman movie? 2, is this the universe that we want to see more of? And 3, and probably most importantly, has James Gunn figured out how to make Superman a compelling and relevant character for today's audiences? And while the answers to these questions might not necessarily be surprising, I definitely think the reasons for them are. So let's just get into it. And heads up, this is a spoiler-free review. I will be posting a spoiler-filled review at a later date. So this film wastes absolutely no time immediately throwing us into this established world where metahumans have been around for centuries. That means Superman isn't this like groundbreaking new phenomenon. He's just simply the latest in a long line of heroes. And this immediate immersion into this established world is a very distinct and intentional decision, and we'll talk about that more later. But first, I just gotta say that the strongest and most compelling force of this movie is its characters. David Cornsweet as Superman absolutely knocks it out of the park in this. No offense, but he is an absolute dork in this, and it's like in the most sincere and heartwarming way, in the most Superman way. Cornsweet's take on Superman is a very compelling, reimagined version for today's world. And in almost what feels like a direct response to Man of Steel, this isn't just a Superman that wants to save people. He wants to make sure they're okay. There's more than one scene in this film where, after Superman is done saving someone, he checks in on them. And it's just a really humanizing element that was so refreshing to see. Audiences, and myself included, have kind of missed the days where heroes were saving people. And it wasn't always the end of the world every time. It was what about the little guy? This movie really reintroduces that relationship between the hero and the people they save. And it just felt good to watch. And the way that Cornsweet portrays it is just such a genuine version of that. But what I think I appreciated most was that this isn't the flawless Superman that we know from Christopher Reeve's portrayal. This is a guy that has genuine flaws and room to grow. I feel like a lot of us understand Superman as this character that always knows the right thing to do and the right thing to say, doesn't really make mistakes like that, and that's not this character. And it's done in a way that is true to his character and gives him real vulnerabilities, but it also makes him a lot more relatable as a person and as a human, which, with the Superman story, that's kind of the point. I did think the whole Gods Among Us approach was cool in the Snyderverse. It did kind of sanitize the characters and make them just too distant from everyday life. And by giving us this relatively early version of Superman slash Clark Kent, we now have this new opportunity to see him become that fully fledged superhero that we all know and love. But if I did have to give a critique, it's that we didn't really get to see much of his Clark Kent persona, especially considering the fact that when he's around people as Clark in this movie, it's usually around people that know his secret identity. Speaking of individuals that know his identity, Lois Lane is in this movie, and she's portrayed by Rachel Brosnahan. I hope I said that right. I feel like Lois is kind of an easier character to bring to modern times, seeing as she's always been this character with integrity and just that journalistic instinct, and I think it's presented really well here. I was pleasantly surprised with how much they gave her to do in this film, and just how much genuine weight she had to the plot outside of her relationship with Superman. And you probably heard a lot about her and Clark's chemistry and how it pops off on screen. But what I actually enjoyed the most was kind of seeing how they clash and how they're kind of opposites, whether it be worldview or relationships. They're not always seeing eye to eye. But then also on top of that, as an audience member, you clearly see that they have a lot to learn from each other. And that's something that I'm actually really looking forward to seeing in future installments. Now, I can't go any further without talking about Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor. This man absolutely despises Superman, and he doesn't care who knows or how crazy it makes him look. He just hates this guy. And seeing these two face to face was just such a rewarding experience. Genuinely, it was these two iconic characters finally being represented in a way that is here to last. I'm so tired of these superhero movies having these one-off villains where it's the villain of the movie and they get killed by the end and you never see him again, and you never really get to see the heroes form relationships with their villains. Just knowing that we are going to see this dynamic, this back and forth for at least the next 10 or so years, I'm excited. I'm happy. I'm happy to see it. I'm happy to see this rivalry. I can go all day talking about this cast. Eddie Gathegi as Mr. Terrific was an absolute scene stealer. Nathan Fillion as Guy Gardner was fantastic. Metamorpho, played by Anthony Carrigan, was an absolute shocker to me. I was not expecting to enjoy that character that much. Just so much in this movie, and its characters is just done so right. And you can see that everyone knows their place and how they fit into this larger world. And trust me, it's a large world. One of the biggest critiques that we've been seeing for this movie is that it's just very stuffed, and there's just so much going on. And after seeing it, I have to agree that there is a lot going on. DC clearly has very ambitious plans for how they see this world moving forward, and they're not shying away from it. And in fact, this movie is a great representation of that by giving us this very populated and very well-established universe where heroes already exist. And to me, it feels like another lesson learned from the Snyderverse, where this movie feels more like a introduction to a universe that is focused on Superman, whereas the Snyderverse kind of felt like it was a Superman movie that was forced to introduce a universe, if that, if you get what I'm saying. So while I can see people thinking this packed, chaotic nature being a problem, personally, I think it was executed very well. I was never lost, I was never confused, and while I can clearly see where sacrifices were made to make room for all these new things, I didn't really see it as an issue. I just see it as kind of choosing our battles here. So yeah, the chaotic nature didn't really bother me, but what did was actually the comedy. Now, I did find this movie funny. I was laughing throughout. I wouldn't say it's funnier than Guardians of the Galaxy. Those movies are just hilarious to me. But this movie has this issue where there would be multiple scenes that would just be building up with these sincere, heartfelt, just emotion-packed character moments. And then James Gunn would just swoop in and just undercut it with a joke that just felt so out of place. Sometimes, yes, it does land, but sometimes it really wouldn't, and it would just completely diminish these moments. And I don't know if it's a reluctance to get super real or if it's just trying to have their cake and eat it too, but I would hope moving forward that they just don't shy away from these moments and just let us have them. There's one specific scene towards the end where one character is just really having their moment, and I'm loving it so much, and then all of a sudden there's just this joke that just completely kills the momentum. Yes, the joke was funny, but I personally would have rather had that moment completed than a couple laughs. Another aspect that occasionally pulled me out was the dialogue. Now, while this movie's messaging and themes I think are handled fantastically, not only in the way that they relate to the heroes and the characters, but also how they relate to the world that that we're in right now. I'm not going to go too deep into it here. I will more in the spoiler review. And honestly, none of it is subtle, but this movie somehow feels like it needs to explain it to you anyway. There were just many scenes in this film where a theme would be very pleasantly and very boldly explained, and then someone will just swoop in and then just kind of repeat the message, and it's yeah, we get it. We're not dumb, It does feel kind of on the nose and redundant at time, but I guess it is them just committing to the messaging. Something else that seems to have people divided is actually the visuals. Now, personally, I wouldn't describe this movie as cinematic as much as, we all hate that word. And there were only one or two scenes where I was watching and I was oh, that looks good. But what this movie offers instead is a ton of cool shit. Personally, my favorite parts of the Snyderverse movies were seeing these heroes run around kicking ass, looking dope. Ever since I saw the flying punch of Man of Steel, I've been begging for more of that. And this movie understands that and then just elevates it into this cartoony style, this comic booky style that just works so well because they committed to it. I could name so many stylized movies out there that don't look realistic, they look ridiculous, but they work because they're committed to that style, and that commitment, when they truly believe in it, comes across to the audience and we start to believe it. There's times in this movie where Superman's twirling around like the Tasmanian devil, and I don't think twice about it because it looks freaking sick. And just the action in general in this movie, sometimes it does get a little kind of crazy, but I loved every second of it. Would I like to see a version of this that combines its more unique style with conventional cinematography? Sure. Will I be upset if they don't? Absolutely not, because it looks sick. How many times have I said it looks sick? I'm sorry. All right, so let's revisit those questions from the beginning. 1. Was this a good Superman movie? Yeah, it was. I might even say it's my favorite Superman movie. This just provides such a fresh, hopeful, and deeply human take on the character that just feels so right for our times. 2. Is this a cinematic universe that I want to see more of? Absolutely. Despite its occasional density, the film successfully introduces a vibrant, lived-in world populated by compelling characters, leaving me, pretty excited for future installments. And 3, does this film truly understand what makes Superman resonate with audiences today? I mean, yeah, this movie understands that Superman isn't just about raw power, but about hope and compassion and just the continuous effort to be better. It embraces his aspirational qualities while grounding him with more relatable struggles. And like I said, the real world parallels that this movie manages to bring in, regardless of them not necessarily being subtle, are the kind of things that, superhero stories are based on and where they come from. So, to see that brought to life once again on screen, I'm here for it. So ultimately, I think the Superman movie is a bold and largely successful step forward. This is a film that isn't afraid to be different, isn't afraid to take risks, and lays down pretty solid groundwork for this new expansive universe. Now, it's not without its flaws, but its strengths, namely its, characterization and its vision for the future just strongly outweigh them. I think it's a must-see for fans and newcomers alike. Wait a sec, did I forget to mention that shows up at the end of this film? Or that Ultraman is actually... Just kidding, it's all in the spoiler review, which you can click right here to watch, and we can talk about everything that happens in this movie. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.